Well, I will thank you, first of all, for being here to see this effort and for the opportunity to give my statement in regards to the war crimes and violations of the international law were carried out by the Israeli Defense Forces backed by the government, the Israeli government. Well, actually, it's very difficult to talk after Matt Gilbert, my dear friend. We have lived for 2 weeks together in Shifa, and we struggled as doctors together. Talking about the violation, I think Matt Gilbert have spoke enough about it. Just few words about the healthcare workers. Well, we are talking about ambulances, we are talking about firefighters, we are talking about voluntary people, medical students who came in case of need to the Shifa, to other hospitals to be in help. Well, I have been told during my management of my colleagues in Shifa Hospital that ambulance workers, paramedics, and firefighters were shot at when they attempted to help people. In case of 2014, the last war, or the recent war, it was observed that Israeli deliberately bombed the ambulances in order to prevent evacuation of patients, of injured people, in order to make it impossible for health workers to do their job. Well, I have been witness managing many health workers severely injured while they were carry out their duties in saving people. People were held as human shields in different places. We know, we all remember the situations in Khuza'a. Mohammed has been mentioned it a lot. In Beit Hanun, in Saja'iyya. These areas have been catastrophically bombed throughout. I will see it's the most catastrophe were in Khuza'a and Saja'iyya. Ambulances were held back, couldn't have the authority or the access to save injured. And this was one of many instances I have been through during my stay in Gaza. Well, I have 3 witnesses. Of course, they are in Gaza now, but these witnesses are illustration of war crimes and violation of international law concerning protecting medical workers in wartime. First one, Mohammed Abou Arab, who became partly deaf after suffering head injuries during an attack on his visibly marked vehicle or ambulance. He was bombed in Khan Yunis on 24th of July. While he was driving his ambulance, several missiles hit him, causing injury to him and to others who were around the ambulance as well. The second one, or another illustration of violation, was ambulance worker Muhammad Al-Abdallah. He was shot in Beit Hanun. He was shot in the hip and the chest. He bled to death. And when his colleagues tried to help him, they were shot at too, to prevent them from helping him. This is example of many cases have been with health workers and health fighters. Eid Mustafa Burai is another ambulance worker, was burned to death in 25 of July in Beit Hanun after a shell hit his ambulance. He was traveling while he was transferring injured patient to the hospital. Jawad Budair, his colleagues, he was sitting next to him, 50-year old paramedic, was severely injured during this attack. Well, the Israeli army didn't spare anybody. They had repeatedly or deliberately bombed and targeted not only health workers in ambulances and hospitals. They targeted as well charity homes like Palestinian Mabarra. It's a home for disabled development disabilities. This home was shot by a missile at 2 o'clock in the morning, and 2 health workers working at this home shelter were injured, and 2 patients have been killed. Workers in the civil defense, well, my brother and colleague, Mats Gilbert, who is really the hero in this case, have been showing some pictures. Many of these are for patients, healthcare workers. We have been working together to manage to treat with the limited sources we had. He was a fighter. He tried to extinguish a fire in a house block in Sajaiya. His fire engine were shot by a shell, and he was injured. 2 colleagues of firefighters were also injured in this attack. In my opinion, I believe that Israel must protect medics and health workers. However, Israel deliberately bombed the health workers, ambulances, healthcare facilities, and everything moving on earth in Gaza. We have heard many times that there is no safe place in Gaza. And it's very important to notice here that if there is no safe place in Gaza, what would civilians do? We have no shelters in Gaza, no basements. It's not allowed, according to Oslo agreement, to build shelters. And so, where is the protection of medical health care workers, for health facilities, for civilians in Gaza? I agree with a lot of suggestions. Navi Pillai said in Geneva that Israel war crimer, or have done a war crime. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch accused Israel for war crimes. And I agree. I just want to ask you to keep on searching, investigation of the war crimes. There is many of these in Gaza. And we have witnesses, we are witnesses, and everybody can see everything on the internet. In the end, I think killing and injuring about 144 healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, paramedics, firefighters, it's enough evidence to call it war, crime war, and to call it with some elements of genocide. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Any questions for Mohammed?
I've got one. Okay. Could you just elaborate on the elements of genocide, please?
Well, as a human being, as a medical doctor, I will say that when in Gaza, civilians were bombed, targeting civilians, healthcare facilities, ambulances, medical workers, infrastructure, everything. In in a sort of causing total collapse to the healthcare system. It should be called, have some elements of genocide. Okay.
We heard in an earlier testimony that people were disappointed in the contribution of the Red Cross. Do you think the attacks on health workers were instrumental in scaring away or in lessening the contribution that charity medical services could offer?
Well, as I witnessed in Gaza, the goal of attacks were to kill, to scare anybody. It didn't scare us, actually. We arrived to Gaza with Matt Gilbert on the 13th of July. We have been working there for 16 days. The problem is the charity and the health workers abroad couldn't have the access to get into Gaza. And one of these was denied twice entry to Gaza. I don't think it will scare anybody. We believe in human rights. Matt, you have some comments?
Mr. Richard Falk would like to ask a question.
Can I just give you this? Because actually what we did was we wrote a letter together, Dr. Erik Fosse, Mohammed Abou Arab, and myself, to the UN General Secretary Ban Ki-moon on August the 4th, where we asked protection from the international community, and it was, of course, never responded to, but this was an urgent letter because of the situation with lack of security.
Thank you. Richard, would you like to ask a question?
One of the very strong elements in your testimony was the fact that there's no safe place in Gaza during a combat of this sort. And that combines with the almost unique situation where the civilian population is essentially locked into the combat zone. Do you consider that a serious gap in international human rights law? And was there any attempt during any of these situations of intense conflict in Gaza to make some kind of appeal to the Israelis to allow people to leave who were disabled or were children or were women? Was there any attempt to challenge this situation of being locked into a combat zone which has, as far as I know, not characterized any of the worst conflict situations in the world, such as Syria at the present time, Iraq, and so on?
Well, I think we have seen a lot of actions all around the world regarding many wars, but in Gaza, it was something special because we have seen a league of actions from all the international organizations, especially those who are crying for human rights and for international law. We have seen that Palestinians have been always accepted from human rights fights. Everything is not allowed in any region in the world, but in Gaza, everything is allowed. Well, I am a member of the Forum of the Palestinian Medics in Europe, and we have tried to get many of these injured children, especially outside Gaza, to get the treatment in European countries and other countries. And we succeed to get 30 of them. But in the matter of fact, it demands a hard work from us to work. We couldn't have any cooperation from the international community. And I'm saying there is a massacre in Gaza and the world is watching.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, please. I have a list here of all killed and injured healthcare workers in Gaza, many sources, and it's a list with names, date of injury, place of injury. Please.
Thank you very much. And I guess we'll put it in the papers of the tribunal.